Good, and yourself?
Good. I'm a little state of shock. Here we are. It's our 50th Zoom meeting, not even counting the AP prep. It's our last meeting of the year. It's June, and it feels weird.
Yeah,
How are you wrapping up with all of your classes?
pretty good. Actually, most of my teachers stopped giving assignments last week, and I had like two of my last Zoom calls last week too.
Right on. So we're like the bitter end for you, huh?
Yeah.
Do you have anything left after this?
No, this is actually my last class.
Right on. Well, let me be the first to wish you a really wonderful summer. I hope that you and your family do something wonderful and enjoy your time together.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Um, did you now remind me, because I don't have the document in front of me, is there anyone here who has not participated or wants to in the Surviving with Class document that may become a book? Okay, I know Deanna submitted. Yasmin, did you contribute to that or not? I forgot.
No.
Okay, is that anything that you have something from your blog that you'd like to contribute or that you're willing to think about?
I'll look over it and see if I have anything.
Okay, because it can be as simple as a cut and paste, and you can just send it to me. In fact, you can just let me know if there's a blog post that you'd like me to see and think about for that, and I'll take care of it and put it on the Google Doc for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my thinking at this point is not to add work or make things challenging for people. It's really just to end the year on a high note. And if there was something wonderful that you contributed, then obviously I want you to be a co-author and get full credit for it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Um, I'm going to keep today pretty short and sweet. What I really want to say is thank you. Thank you to everyone who's on this Zoom call. Thank you to everyone who's watching the recording or who participated in the past. None of us anticipated what was going to happen this year. And, you know, the fact is that on one hand, it seems like it's been forever. And in another way, it seems like it just blew right by like the school year always does. But as I mentioned a little while ago, this is our 50th Zoom meeting, and my hat's completely off because all of you really proved yourself to be resilient people, thoughtful people. We've all felt, I'm sure, feelings of fatigue and stress and confusion and sometimes even loneliness, but that didn't stop you from showing up, doing your jobs as best you could under the circumstances. And I feel really fortunate to know you. I feel really humbled and blessed to be a part of this group. So that's my message today is thank you. I am going to put up one last course blog post for today, and I'll include this recording along with that. Does anybody have anything that you'd like to share? Because ordinarily this would be where we would be like feasting and celebrating and sharing recollections and reflections on the year. Is there anything that you'd like to share that you learned from this course or in our work together? I'm curious.
Well, I just want to start off by saying thank you, Mr. Preston, for such a good year. We had a fun yet stressful junior year, so it was a good year, so I thank you for that. And I also just want to thank you, too, for allowing us to learn in this new style of learning with open source, especially, like, you know, no one saw this pandemic coming, but even then, like, we were still somewhat prepared because we were used to learning online with our online equipment. And so I just want to say thank you to letting us try a different style of learning and try different things than a typical English class would do.
My pleasure, Deanna. Thanks for saying so. You know, on that line, I am meeting with two superintendents from our district tomorrow morning. And part of what we're going to be talking about, I think I may have mentioned this a while back, but we are going to be exploring the possibility of creating a virtual learning academy for a small number of students who are interested in pursuing it. And that would be an alternative or a complement to being on campus. No one really knows yet what that reopening is going to look like. And I'm also serving on that task force with the superintendents. But the reality is, if there's an outbreak, if campus has to close, this would be an opportunity for us to really pursue the interdisciplinary big questions. And you would still be getting credit for courses that you would be programmed into for your A through G requirements, et cetera. But I'm wondering if anybody here wants me to consider you for that as we start to think about it, as opposed to starting the year on campus. Does anybody have any questions about what that might look like?
Would you be telling them similarly like what our class has done like this junior year as like an idea?
Yeah, that would be part of it. And
Okay.
part of it would also be modeling things, some of which you haven't even seen. There are about 1 billion tools that people can use online to share ideas and provide feedback and to connect. And we barely scratched the surface this year. As you saw with a lot of your teachers, no one was really trained or prepared for the online learning world. And so I didn't want to blow people out, but there's a lot of stuff out there that we weren't using. I'll give you an example real quick. Let's see if I can find this easily. I can't. So I'll leave it at that for now. But basically, it's similar to what we're doing in this class, except that it would be for all of your subjects, and it would be with your agreeing to participate as opposed to being forced into it. And it would be studying the things that you think are important and then merging those with academic subjects. So for example, who has a big question that they didn't get to think about this year, but they were excited about?
I did. Well, it's confusing. Well, I want to share it. So my big question was about how can vertical farming improve our lives, or how can like it stop people, like how can it like everyone have vertical farming at their homes? Because I know sometimes people spend more money, like they spend more than they need to if they had a garden at their own house. And sometimes people live in apartments, which we have a lot here in Santa Maria. So I know there's not many spaces for them to have a farm. So I thought vertical farming was a solution. And well, I didn't really get to do the whole project. I did do an essay for another class about it. And I also started my own garden before COVID-19. So at least I feel kind of accomplished of what I did. I wanted to do a video about it, but I never got the chance to do a video since I'm already getting started. And I also made it a Facebook page with my journey of my garden. So I think I kind of accomplished, but kind of didn't, because I really wanted to focus on how everyone else can also do it as well.
That's brilliant. And so I love that as an example for a few reasons. When you think about that topic, that is so big that it would really take some time. And if you think about the classes that you would be enrolled in for next year, English language arts is an easy one because you'd be writing about it and you'd be exploring that in interviews, et cetera. Mathematics, though, gardening has a lot of math and chemistry and biology. You could translate that into Spanish. I mean, there's so many extensions of that. So basically, Deanna, to answer your question, one way this could look would be just to take courses according to what you already have in your program for your senior year. And it's very doable, as you've seen in our work together, to create a course, deliver it online, do the kinds of assignments that you expect, get a grade and get credit and move on. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to have a conversation with a learner and their families at the beginning of the semester, make the agreement around a big question. That doesn't have to last for a semester or a year, but that can begin to integrate these things. And this is where I have some gifts and some experiences that other teachers may not, but I'm certainly happy to work with individual students and their families to create something that's meaningful, like what Odalise was describing, as essentially your senior thesis. And by ticking off all of the requirements for the courses in your program that relate to that along the way, you're actually killing two birds with one stone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So we've never done this before. Comprehensive high school in America typically doesn't work this way. But there are education philosophies. If you've ever heard of Waldorf or Montessori schools or Reggio Emilia, are any of those familiar to you?
Not to me.
Okay. So if you look in the phone book or if people use those anymore, if you look on the internet and just look up like Montessori schools, you'll see that there are schools that operate on what they call a learner-centered philosophy. What we are all in right now is very much a school-centered philosophy. That's kind of the factory model where everyone passes through and does the same work on the same day in the same way. A learner-centered philosophy is much more individual. And it's kind of like the difference if you go to a Ross or a TJ Maxx and you've got small, medium, and large, you better fit one of those because otherwise you're out of luck. But if you go to a tailor and they take your measurements and they make something specifically for you, that's more like what I'm describing here in terms of education. And obviously the hope is that if you're passionate about something, like when I heard about vertical farming just now, I can't see Odalise right now, but man, your enthusiasm just jumped out of my computer at me. Well, that's the person who's going to be doing really wonderful work and creating opportunities for scholarships and college admissions. And Deanna, I remember your interest in engineering. It's one thing just to tick off the coursework and have a GPA, but then you're in the same competitive soup as everybody else who did the exact same thing. If you have actually designed and built something through your own initiative with expert guides who can vouch for you, that gives you a sustainable competitive advantage when it comes to getting those opportunities. So I'm wondering how that hits you all and what questions you might have as I think about what I say to the superintendents tomorrow. Any concerns or any questions or anything that I might add to it from your perspective?
I'm just wondering, would this go for like all the high school students, like all of SM students? Or like,
This is going to be for a small number of what we call early adopters. So the hope is that that I will be able to train more teachers in how to use some of these tools and do these processes. But right now, I mean, you know how different our class was from some of your other classes on campus. Right now, this is going to be an alternative for maybe 50, maybe 100, depending on the number of teachers that are willing to join me in doing this to begin with. But there are also a lot of teachers who, for whatever their reasons, either can't or don't want to do things differently. And it's not going to be for everybody. So this is going to start off with a small cadre of people. And as you can imagine, it's also got to be a cadre of people that knows how to make a commitment and keep their agreements. So it's not going to be something that's forced on people. It's going to be something where there's going to be a select number of invitations, and it's going to be something that people get to do, not so much have to do. Does that answer your question?
yes, it does.
I also think it's important to say that it's also going to be for English language learners and some special ed students, because it's not just, you know, I think that a lot of the time the most goal-oriented and the brightest students make the most of their education on campus. And some of that might be true online as well. I also think it's important to give opportunities for everyone, because you never know who has a special gift and just never got to express themselves in that way. And so I want to have a cross-section of students so that we can really see how it works for different people at different levels. So no pressure where I'm concerned. If anybody's interested in it, you can always send me an email, or if any of you or your families have thoughts about whether or not it's safe or comfortable to return to campus, as much as I know everyone would love to, including me, I'll be happy to continue those conversations with you over the summer. Any thoughts on that for now?
So would a classroom look like having one teacher, or would we having like different amount of teachers like we usually do?
So it would probably look like having me, and when it comes to content specific stuff that I may not have expertise in, remember that kid that I showed you learn how to fly an airplane?
Yes.
At the beginning of the year in the video? I have no business grading someone on how to fly an airplane, right? I'm not a pilot. I don't know really anything about it other than how to ride in one. So there's a good example of where, even though I was sort of the main guide for the process, and I was certainly able to give him some content and some feedback, when it came to specific things where I was not the expert, that's the open source part of this. We brought in people who could help and who could evaluate and guide specifically and even test occasionally, so that he was getting the best of all worlds. So the model that I'm going to be presenting tomorrow is basically, 100 students or so with me as the primary educator, guide, facilitator, along with a vertical farmer, along with an agricultural chemist, along with whatever else we need to make sure that you get the information you want. And for those students who are doing the traditional coursework, there's coursework all over the internet, and we also have some really talented teachers who I know will partner with me in this. So if you just want, the traditional 6 classes, then I would be kind of the main guide and administrator, but you would also be coordinating with those other teachers to get the specific content and the specific evaluation that you need. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Yeah,
Sorry.
Dina?
Oh no, I wasn't saying anything. Odalis, you can go.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So it would be only for students that are going on campus, right?
I'm sorry, Odo?
It's only for students that are going on campus?
I think that this would be for students who are not going to campus.
Oh, not going. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
And
my parents are like not sure if they're gonna allow us to go back to school or not, because my dad and his family recently, in this past 2 weeks, 3 people had died with from the coronavirus, which is kind of scary, but not in California. So that's the thing. Like right now we're super not sure what's going on, because right now we haven't heard of anyone like a young dying here or around their family members.
right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that, there are a lot of people who, and the challenging thing is we don't know exactly who has it because it's asymptomatic, and we don't know who has an underlying condition sometimes until it's too late. So I know that there's a lot of concern, and that's partially why I'm exploring this option. I don't think, there's certainly no penalty or incentive for doing things one way or the other. And it may very well be that people who have extracurricular activities, if those become safe or allowed, you would still be a saint. You would still be able to do those kinds of things, I think. This would just be a way to minimize, really, it's kind of a double-edged thing, because on one hand, you're minimizing your exposure in terms of the coronavirus, but I think the other thing is you're really maximizing your opportunity to create an individualized education that is hopefully more tailored to you than anything else you've done in school so far. So with all that being said, before we had a few more people jump on the call, I was asking about the surviving with class. There's a perfectly good example of something we never anticipated. I never knew, even before this year, that the history of indigenous Mesoamerica was recorded by people who huddled up in a convent during a pandemic. I had no clue about that. And so it was exciting to me, not just to learn about that, but also to share with all of you the opportunity for us to document our real-time experiences. And for me, that's the magic of doing things the way that we do it, as opposed to following along in a textbook page by page and question and test by question and test. Another example is what happened with George Floyd and the nation's protests, the world's protests this last week. If I were to teach straight American literature next year, I would probably focus on authors of color. I would throw out the chronology that I taught this year that started with the pre-colonial and the colonial, and I would probably focus on authors like Malcolm X, Langston Hughes, W.E.B. Du Bois. There's a very rich tradition, and I've been very fortunate in my life to do a lot of reading with a lot of really brilliant people of color. But I would want to change things because I think it's important for our education to be integrated with the actual world we're living in, so that we can all be more effective in navigating that world. So even if I was just teaching on campus next year, I'd probably do it differently. I have just about every year.
That sounds very interesting, Dr. Preston.
Well, isn't that like life?
True that.
The only place that we've ever made that kind of stuff boring happens to be school. But once again, I really appreciate all the efforts that all of you put in and just getting to know you in a different way. You know, I mean, right now, they say that when one sense is taken away, the other senses are heightened. Right now, I can't see any of you, but hearing you in a different way and coming to you live from my own home every day for the last 50 days has been an interesting education, but also an experience I'll never forget along with you. So once again, now that we know each other, we're never going to unknow each other. So feel free as things come up over the summer, or if you ever need a letter of recommendation, to get in touch. I do hope that you'll take a look in a few minutes, because I am going to put one more post up with a very special message from Henry David Thoreau. And does anybody have any final words? Jennifer, I see your text, and thank you too. But hearing none for the moment, this class is formally adjourned, and I wish you all every success as you go forward in the future.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry, I just had to.
Fair game. I've been called worse. Thanks, Lena.
Oh, no.
All right. Bye, everybody. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
You too.